The humid air of the Xylosian royal palace clung to Joran's fatigued skin like a second uniform he hadn't asked for. He'd been stumbling through the echoing corridors for what felt like hours after a routine security briefing gone sideways. His translator implant had glitched, misrouting him through a labyrinth of gilded halls meant only for the royal bloodline and their most trusted attendants. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His boots silent against the polished obsidian floors veined with luminescent silver. He was just a liaison officer from Earth's coalition forces, stationed here as a gesture of peace after the third skirmish of the Outer Rim. He wasn't supposed to be wandering alone. He certainly wasn't supposed to be lost. And under no circumstances was he meant to open the wrong door. Yet there he stood, palm pressed against cool jade inlaid with iridescent mother-of-pearl, thinking it was the men's refresher he'd been desperately seeking. The door slid open with a whisper, steam billowing out like fog from some forgotten dream. Warmth wrapped around him, thick with the scent of moonblossom petals and something faintly metallic. Ozone, maybe, or the alien equivalent of bath salts. He stepped inside before his brain could catch up with his feet, and froze. The chamber was a masterpiece of organic architecture. Walls curved like seashells, archways draped in living vines that glowed softly in gradients of lavender and gold. At its heart, sunken into the floor like a natural spring, lay a bath carved from a single slab of aquamarine crystal, its surface rippling gently as though stirred by unseen currents. And in it, rising from the steam like a vision summoned from myth, was Princess Vera. She was green-skinned, not the sickly green of old Earth cartoons, but a rich, forest hue that shimmered with undertones of olive and emerald under the soft palace lights. Her hair, long and thick and impossibly white, floated around her like a halo in the water, strands clinging to the elegant slope of her shoulders. She had high cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes the color of molten amber, and lips parted in surprise. Her body, though partially veiled by the water, was undeniably regal, graceful, and strong, shaped by both royal poise and warrior's discipline. Around her neck hung a single pendant, glowing faintly, the royal seal of House Xylos. For one breath, two, three, neither moved. Then her eyes sharpened, amber flaring like twin suns in twilight. A low, guttural sound escaped her. Not quite a growl, not quite a hiss, but something primal that made Joran's spine lock up. He spun on his heel, hands flying up in surrender even as his boots skidded on the wet floor. I thought this was the men's quarter, he stammered, voice cracking like a teenager's. My implant. It said refresher access. I swear I didn't. He didn't finish. The door slammed shut behind him with a resonant boom, not by his doing. Instead, the vines along the walls stirred, tendrils lashing out like sentient whips. From hidden alcoves, a dozen royal guards, tall, green-skinned sentinels clad in matte black armor etched with crimson glyphs, materialized in perfect silence. Their weapons, sleek energy staves humming with restrained power, leveled at his chest. Princess Vera rose from the water in one fluid motion, water cascading off her form as she stepped onto the stone platform. She didn't cover herself. Shame wasn't in her vocabulary, but fury? Oh, fury lived deep in her bones. She wrapped herself in a robe woven from starlight thread, shimmering, weightless, and somehow more intimidating than any armor. Explain yourself, human, she commanded, her voice low and smooth, yet edged like a vibroblade. One lie, and I feed you to the sky serpents in the crimson chasm. Joran swallowed hard. Joran Vel, liaison officer, Earth Coalition, assigned to your father's court 3 weeks ago. I was returning from the security annex when my implant rerouted me. Wrong corridor, wrong door. I didn't know. I swear on my mother's name I didn't. She studied him, eyes narrowing. You're the one who stopped the skirmish near the dust dunes. The human who carried my cousin, General Talera, from the wreckage of her skiff. He blinked. I didn't know she was your cousin. She is, Vera said, her tone softening just a fraction. And you saved her life without asking for reward. She tilted her head. Yet you stumble into my bath like a drunken spacer? I got turned around, he insisted, desperation cracking his voice again. This palace is bigger than my whole hometown. A flicker of something crossed her face. Amusement? Pity? It vanished as quickly as it came. She raised a hand, and the guards lowered their staves just slightly. You've seen what no outsider has seen in 5 centuries. The royal bath is sacred. Only betrothed mates or bloodkin may enter. Joran's stomach dropped. I'm not. I didn't. Silence, she said, but not unkindly. Then, to the guards, take him to the azure chamber. Do not harm him, and summon my mother. The guards flanked him, their grip firm but not painful. As they led him away, Joran dared one glance back. Vera stood beneath the arched doorway, robe clinging to her silhouette, white hair dripping onto the stone. Her amber eyes followed him, not with hate, but with something far more complicated. The azure chamber was less a prison and more a gilded waiting room. Walls lined with tapestries depicting ancient Zylosian wars, floors cushioned with moss that released a calming aroma when stepped on. He sat on a low divan, heart still hammering, replaying the moment over and over. He'd seen her, really seen her. Not just a diplomat's photo or a holoscreen broadcast, but the raw, unguarded truth of her. And now he was probably going to be executed, exiled, or worse, forced into some political marriage to preserve honor. His fears weren't unfounded. An hour passed, then two. Just as he began to wonder if they'd forgotten him, the massive doors groaned open. Not guards this time, but the Empress herself. Empress Lysara was taller than her daughter, her green skin marked with intricate silver tattoos that pulsed faintly with bioluminescence. Symbols of her lineage, her conquests, her grief. Her white hair was braided tightly, coiled like a crown, and her eyes, they held galaxies. She moved with the quiet power of tectonic plates shifting. "You are Joran Vel," she said, not as a question. "Yes, your radiance," he replied, bowing his head respectfully. "You stumbled into my daughter's sanctum." "I did. By accident." "Accidents have consequences," she said, sitting across from him. "In our culture, to witness the unguarded form of a royal female is to bind your fate to hers. It is not a law written in stone, but in blood, in soul." Joran's mouth went dry. "I don't understand." "Then I shall make it plain," she said, leaning forward. "You may choose, exile to the void wastes where no ship returns, or you may accept a trial. If you complete it, you walk free. If you fail, you die. But if you succeed and Vera consents, you become her consort." His breath caught. "Consort? As in husband? As in mate?" The Empress corrected gently. "Partner, protector, equal." "I'm just a soldier," he whispered. "I'm nobody." "You carried my niece from a burning skiff while under fire," Lysara said. "You treated her wounds with your own medkit when your side had every reason to leave her. You did it without glory, without demand. That makes you more than nobody." Before he could respond, the doors opened again. Vera entered, now fully armored in gleaming silver-green battle plate, her white hair tied back in a warrior's knot. She looked every inch the princess warrior of legend. But when her eyes met his, he saw the same flicker of uncertainty he'd glimpsed in the bath chamber. "I've spoken with Mother," she said, voice steady. "I accept the trial, but only if he chooses it freely." Joran looked between them. Mother and daughter, both formidable, both watching him with the weight of an empire in their gaze. He thought of Earth, of his tiny apartment, of his mother's voice on the comm saying, "Be kind, Joran. Kindness is rarer than courage." He thought of the dust dunes, of Talara's hand gripping his as he dragged her to safety. He thought of Vera in the steam, not ashamed, not hiding, just seen. "I'll do it," he said. The trial would begin at dawn. The Zylosian trial of the twin moons was not for the faint of heart. Held in the scar of Xylos, a canyon so deep it cut through the planet's crust, the contestant had to descend into the abyss, retrieve the heartstone from the lair of the Shadow Maw, and return before the twin moons aligned overhead. Few survived. None had succeeded in 3 generations. Joran stood at the canyon's edge at first light, clad in borrowed armor that fit poorly but offered some protection. Vera stood beside him, silent. She hadn't spoken to him since the azure chamber. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. She turned to him, amber eyes unreadable. "I do. Honor demands it. But know this, if you die down there, I will mourn you. Not because you saw me, but because you are decent." He almost laughed. "Decent? That's it. It is rarer than you think?" she said, and for the first time, the corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then the gong sounded. He rappelled down using a biocord that glowed faintly as it unspooled. The canyon walls were alive, pulsing with bioluminescent fungi, whispering with unseen creatures. Halfway down, the cord snapped. He fell, tumbling through darkness, landing hard on a ledge. Ribs screamed. Vision swam. But he got up. Because he had to. The Shadow Maw wasn't a beast. It was worse. A living storm of darkness, woven from ancient grief and forgotten rage. It had no form, only hunger. It spoke in voices. His mother's, his dead squadmates, even Vera's, begging him to turn back. You don't belong here. It hissed in a chorus of sorrow. You are human, fragile, temporary. I'm Joran Vel, he growled, clutching the plasma dagger Vera had given him. And I don't run. He plunged into the storm. What followed wasn't combat, it was reckoning. The Maw showed him his fears. Failing Earth, failing the Xylosians, failing Vera. It showed him her face when she learned he'd died a coward. And in that moment, he did the one thing no warrior before him had done. He stopped fighting. He sat down in the heart of the storm and said, I'm scared, but I won't let fear decide my worth. The storm stilled. From its center, a stone emerged, warm, pulsing, humming with life. The Heartstone. He took it. Climbing out was harder than falling in. Bruised, bleeding, half delirious. He dragged himself over the canyon rim just as the twin moons aligned. Cheers erupted, but he didn't hear them. He saw only Vera, running toward him, her armor discarded, her face raw with worry. She caught him before he collapsed. You idiot, she whispered, tears glinting in her amber eyes. You absolute, glorious idiot. He smiled weakly. Did I pass? She pressed the Heartstone to his chest. You rewrote the trial. In the days that followed, the palace buzzed with rumors. The human had tamed the Shadow Maw not with strength, but with truth. The Empress declared it a sign from the ancestors. The court debated endlessly. Some called for celebration, others for caution. But Vera? She spent every evening in the royal gardens with Joran, walking beneath twin moons, talking of Earth and Xylos, of war and peace, of loneliness and belonging. One night, she stopped beneath a blooming sky willow, its petals drifting like stars. You never asked, she said softly. Asked what? Why no one has ever sought my hand. I am heir to the throne. I am skilled in war and statecraft. Yet I have no betrothed. He looked at her, really looked. Why? Because my kind, we bond for life. Once, only once. And if the bond is broken, we wither. My mother's mate died in the First War. She never looked again. I feared choosing wrong. Feared emptiness. He stepped closer. And now, she met his gaze, unflinching. Now I wonder if kindness might be stronger than fear. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But he took her hand, green and warm in his, and held it beneath the falling petals. Back in the palace, the Empress watched from a balcony, a rare smile on her lips. The stars above Xylos burned brighter that night, as if the universe itself approved. And somewhere in the corridors, a young servant whispered to another, Did you hear? The humans moving into the West Wing. But the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because 3 days later, a distress beacon flared from the outer colonies. Raiders, merciless, human-led, wielding stolen Xylosian tech, had taken a village hostage. Among the captives, children from both species, including Talara's youngest daughter. Vera received the message in the war room, her expression hardening into that of a general, not a princess. She turned to Joran, who stood by the holomap, his human eyes sharp with the same resolve she'd seen in the dust dunes. We ride at dawn, she said. He nodded. Together. And as they prepared for battle, not as strangers, not as accidental lovers, but as partners forged in steam and shadow, the palace hummed with a new kind of energy. Hope, danger, destiny. For Joran Vel, the human who saw what he should never have seen, had not only survived, he had begun to belong. And in a galaxy torn by war, that was the most revolutionary act of all. Dawn came not with birdsong, but with the low thrum of war skiffs powering up in the royal hangar. The twin moons still clung to the violet sky as Joran pulled on his reinforced coalition vest, now patched with Xylosian weave, and checked the charge on his pulse rifle. It sat heavier in his hands than it used to, not from weight but from purpose. He wasn't just defending a treaty anymore. He was defending her, them, the fragile, improbable future blooming between human and Xylosian like moon blossoms in cracked stone. Vera stood beside the lead skiff, already armored in her battle harness, silver-green plates gleaming under the hangar lights. Her white hair was braided tight against her skull, but a few loose strands caught the wind, glowing faintly in the pre-dawn gloom. She didn't greet him with words. Instead, she tossed him a wrist-mounted shield generator and Xylosian design usually reserved for royal guards. "Don't get yourself shot before we even land," she said. Voice low but edged with something that wasn't quite command, wasn't quite plea. He activated the device. A shimmering hemisphere of energy flickered to life around his forearm. "Wouldn't dream of it." She studied him a moment longer, then nodded. "Good, because if you die out there, I'll hunt your spirit across 7 afterlives and scold you for being reckless." He grinned despite himself. Noted. They boarded the skiff in silence, flanked by 30 of Vera's elite. Warriors with hardened eyes and ceremonial tattoos, marking them as survivors of the Dust Dunes conflict. The engines roared, and the palace grounds fell away beneath them, shrinking into a jewel of light against the endless desert expanse. The raiders had struck the settlement of Kaelvar, a hybrid colony nestled in the Crimson Canyons, where human settlers and Xylosian refugees had built something rare: coexistence. Now, smoke stained the horizon. Joran watched through the viewport as the skiff descended, his stomach tightening. Below, the village burned, not with chaos, but with cruel precision. Buildings were intact. Only the comms towers and defense emplacements had been destroyed. This wasn't mindless violence. It was control, intimidation, and right in the center of the town square, bound in energy cuffs that crackled with stolen Xylosian tech, stood a line of captives. Among them, Talara's daughter, barely 16, her green skin smudged with ash, her white hair tangled, but her amber eyes blazing with defiance. Beside her, human children, some no older than 8, huddled together, trembling but unharmed. "They're using the kids as leverage," Joran muttered. "Worse," Vera said, her voice like ice. "They're trying to fracture us. Human against Xylosian. They know we're fragile right now. One spark, and the alliance crumbles." The skiff landed a click north, hidden behind a rock formation. They moved on foot, silent as shadows. Joran stayed close to Vera, his rifle slung low. He'd fought in urban combat before, but never like this, never with someone whose heartbeat he could feel in his own chest, even from a meter away. They reached the edge of the village by mid-morning. From a ruined watchtower, they observed the enemy. 20 raiders, mostly human, but wearing mismatched armor patched with Xylosian insignia they'd clearly scavenged or stolen. Their leader stood atop a repurposed hover truck, tall and gaunt, with a scar running from temple to chin. He held a comrade, broadcasting on open frequency. "Empress Lysara," he bellowed, voice crackling through the village speakers. "You have until sunset to renounce your treaty with the human filth. Hand over your daughter's betrothed, yes, we know about the human Joranvel, and swear never to interfere in the outer colonies again. Or we execute 1 child every hour, starting with the half-breed brat." Talara's daughter flinched but didn't cry out. Joran's knuckles whitened on his rifle. Vera's hand closed over his. "Don't," she whispered. "He wants you to charge. Wants you to be the reckless human who ruins everything." "I can't just watch," he said, voice rough. "You won't have to," she replied, eyes scanning the rooftops. "They've got snipers on the East Granary and the West Spire. 2 on patrol, for guarding the captives directly. The rest are in the command tent behind the well." She pulled a small device from her belt, a harmonic pulse emitter. "This'll disrupt their comms and energy cuffs for 60 seconds. But only if I get within 50 meters. And the snipers? I'll handle them," she said. Then looked at him, really looked. "You get the kids out. Fast. Quiet. If they see you human, unarmed except for that rifle, they might think you're one of them. Distrust runs deep here." He nodded. "What's the signal?" She tapped her earpiece. "When you hear birdsong, you'll know it's me. Move." Then, before he could respond, she leaned in and pressed her forehead to his. A Xylosian gesture of trust, a farewell, of hope, and she was gone. Joran waited, breath held, as the minutes crawled. He watched the raiders pace, watched the children shiver in the dust. He thought of his own childhood, safe, boring, ordinary. He'd never imagined he'd be crouched in an alien ruin, ready to risk everything for kids he'd never met. Then birds. Not real birds. A soft, melodic chirp through his earpiece. Vera's signal. He moved. Dropping from the tower, he sprinted low and fast, using rubble for cover. He reached the edge of the square just as the harmonic pulse detonated with a silent flash. The energy cuffs around the children's wrists flickered and died. The raiders shouted in confusion as their comms fizzled out. Now, Joran hissed, stepping into the open, hands raised. I'm with the Zylosian Royal Guard. Get behind me now. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Talara's daughter recognized him. It's him, she cried. The human who saved Aunt Talara. That was all it took. The children surged toward him. But the raiders recovered fast. Gunfire erupted. A plasma bolt seared past Joran's shoulder. He shoved the kids toward an alley. Run. To the north ridge. There's a skiff waiting. He turned, rifle up, laying down covering fire. He wasn't a marksman like Vera, but he was steady. One raider went down. Another ducked for cover. Then, screams from the rooftops. Vera moved like vengeance itself. She dropped from the granary, landing on a sniper and snapping his neck with brutal efficiency. She vaulted from roof to roof, a silver-green blur. Plasma bolts sparked off her shield as she closed in. She fought not with rage, but with chilling precision, each strike disabling, not killing unless necessary. She was sending a message. This is our home. You do not threaten our children. Joran covered the retreat, backing toward the alley as the last child scrambled past him. He was about to follow when a shot rang out, different, sharper, human-made. Pain exploded in his side. He stumbled, falling to one knee. Blood soaked through his vest. He looked up. The raider leader stood 10 meters away, smoking pistol in hand, sneering. Joran Vel, the man said. Traitor to your kind. Joran gritted his teeth. I'm not your kind. Before the raider could fire again, a glowing energy blade pierced his chest from behind. He gasped, eyes wide, then crumpled. Vera stood behind him, blade retracting into her gauntlet, breathing hard. Her armor was scorched, a cut bleeding along her temple, but her eyes found Joran instantly. Joran! She was at his side in seconds, pressing a med seal to his wound. Idiot! You were supposed to run. I got most of them out, he managed, wincing. She looked toward the alley. The last child had vanished over the ridge. Safe. Her shoulders slumped, just for a second. Then she hauled him up, arm around his waist. You're heavy for a human, says the woman who weighs twice as much as me in armor. He groaned. She actually laughed, short, breathless. Real. Come on, consort. Let's get you home. Back at the palace, the healers worked through the night. Joran's wound wasn't fatal, thanks to Vera's quick seal, but it would take weeks to fully mend. He awoke in a sunlit chamber. Not the azure room, but something softer, personal. Tapestries of earth and xylos hung side by side. A small terrarium held a sapling from his hometown. A gift, the attendant said, from the princess. She entered as if summoned by his thoughts, still in her armor, though the blood had been cleaned away. She carried a tray with broth and pain suppressants. You're awake, she said, setting it down. Good. I was about to throw water on you. He tried to sit up. She pushed him gently back down. Don't. You lost a lot of blood, and you disobeyed a direct order. I saved the kids. You almost got yourself killed. They're alive because of me. They're alive because we worked together, she corrected, meeting his eyes. You don't have to carry everything alone, Joran. He looked away, throat tight. I'm used to it. Not anymore. Silence settled between them, comfortable this time. Outside, the twin moons rose again. After a while, she sat on the edge of the bed. The Empress has called a council. The raiders were funded by a human faction, Black Reach. They've been sabotaging the alliance from the start. We think they have spies in the coalition. Joran frowned. That means this isn't over. No, she said. It's just beginning. But now we face it together. She took his hand. Her skin was cool, her grip firm. The trial is over, Joran. But the bond? That's just starting. He turned his hand, lacing his fingers with hers. What happens now? She leaned closer, her white hair falling like silk over his blanket. Now, she whispered, you rest, then you train. Then you stand beside me, not as a human liaison, not as a trial winner, but as my equal. My partner. My husband, if you'll have me. His breath caught. You're asking me? I'm offering, she said, a faint blush coloring her green cheeks. No pressure, just truth. He smiled, tired but whole. Then yes, 1,000 times yes. She didn't kiss him then, not yet, but she rested her forehead against his again. And in that quiet moment, beneath alien stars, Joran Vel knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. And far away, in the shadows of the galaxy, Black Reach plotted their next move. But they didn't know what the Xylosians now knew. That kindness, when paired with courage, could forge something unbreakable. The war wasn't over, but neither were they. The months that followed were anything but quiet. But they were theirs. Black Reach struck again, this time targeting supply convoys, then diplomatic outposts, always just beyond the reach of royal forces. But Joran and Vera were no longer reacting. They were building. Together, they trained a new joint task force. Human sharpshooters paired with Xylosian shield warriors, engineers sharing schematics across species, medics blending coalition biogel with Xylosian regenerative moss. Trust, once a fragile seedling, grew roots deep enough to weather suspicion and sabotage. And through it all, something quieter bloomed between them. Evenings once spent reviewing battle maps became shared meals in the palace gardens. Joran taught Vera how to brew earth coffee. Bitter, but strangely comforting, she'd admitted after her third cup. She showed him how to weave starlight thread into protective charms, threading one into his glove before every mission. They argued over tactics, laughed over human sitcoms she found bafflingly chaotic, and once, during a rare moment of stillness beneath the twin moons, she kissed him. Not out of duty, not because of the trial, but because, she whispered against his lips, I missed you today, even though you were right beside me. The Empress watched it all with quiet satisfaction. She'd seen empires rise and fall, alliances forged in blood and shattered by pride. But this was something new, something tender. When Black Reach's leader, a disgraced coalition admiral named Rourke, was finally cornered in the Ashen Wastes, it was Joran who negotiated his surrender, not with threats, but with truth. We don't have to keep fighting, he said over the comms, Vera standing firm at his side. There's room for everyone here, even you. Rourke, broken and exhausted, laid down his weapons. Peace didn't come overnight, but it came, and with it a wedding. It was held in the grand courtyard of the Xylosian palace, beneath an arch of living sky willow branches. Human and Xylosian dignitaries stood side by side. Talara's daughter, now a cadet in the Joint Guard, served as Vera's honor-bearer. Joran wore a uniform stitched with both coalition insignia and the emerald sigil of House Xylos. Vera walked toward him barefoot, her white hair unbound, her green skin glowing in the sunlight, her amber eyes bright with tears she didn't bother to hide. I choose you, she said before the gathered assembly. Not because fate demanded it, but because my heart has no other home. Joran, voice thick, replied, and I choose you, not as a princess, not as a warrior, but as Vera, my partner, my equal, my love. They sealed their vows by pressing their palms together over the heartstone, now set into a pendant they would both wear for the rest of their lives. Peace held, and so did they. Their first child, a daughter named Lyra, was born under the twin moons, her skin a soft jade, her hair a shock of silver white, her eyes the warm brown of her father's. She crawled before she walked, and by 3, she was already trying to commandeer palace skiffs for strategic reconnaissance. Then came twins, Kale and Mira. Kale, with Joran's stubborn jaw and Vera's strategic mind, could dismantle a plasma rifle by age 5. Mira, quieter but fiercer, once scared off a palace serpent by mimicking her mother's battle cry. Later, 2 more followed, Rian and Alara, rounding out a chaotic, loving household where bedtime stories blended earth fairy tales with Xylosian star myths, where dinner often ended in flower fights, and where the palace guards learned to duck when the little royals staged mock invasions of the throne room. Joran never returned to Earth permanently, but he brought pieces of it with him. A cherry tree planted beside the royal fountains, a shelf of old paperback novels in their private quarters, the sound of his mother's laughter echoing through weekly comms calls. Vera, once feared as the Iron Princess of Xylos, became known as the Mother of 5 and later, to the delight of diplomats across the sector, the Grandmother of 12. She still trained warriors, still advised the Empress, and later, her own daughter, who inherited the throne with Lyra's signature blend of grace and grit. But her favorite moments were simple. Mornings sipping coffee with Joran on their balcony, watching their grandchildren chase sky lizards through the gardens. They grew old together. Joran's hair turned white long before his time. Vera teased, "Stress from chasing you," he'd retort. Her battle scars faded to silver lines, badges of a life well lived. They held each other through losses, through triumphs, through the quiet magic of ordinary days. And when, decades later, they sat side by side beneath the sky willow, now a mighty tree shading half the courtyard. Their hands still fit together like they were made to. The galaxy had known war. It had known fear. But in the heart of the Xylosian palace, peace wasn't just a treaty. It was a family. It was laughter echoing down marble halls. It was a human man and an alien princess who chose each other again and again. Through battles, through bath mishaps, through burnt coffee and bedtime stories and the messy, glorious chaos of love. They had not just lived. They had thrived. And as the twin moons rose one last time over their home, casting silver light on the faces of their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren gathered around them, Joran squeezed Vera's hand. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they smiled, because they had everything, and it was enough. Years melted into decades like desert sand through open fingers. Joran's dark hair silvered, his hands grew rough with age, but his eyes still lit up the moment Vera entered the room. She, too, bore the marks of time, fine lines around her amber eyes, a slower step, though her spirit remained unshaken. Their home echoed with laughter. 5 children, then 12 grandchildren, then more human, Xylosian, and beautiful blends of both, all raised on stories of a clumsy human who once walked into the wrong bath and found his forever. They rebuilt villages together, signed peace charters side by side, and still stole quiet mornings on their balcony with shared coffee and silent understanding. The Heartstone pendant never left their necks, its glow soft but constant, like their bond. On their 50th anniversary, the entire palace threw a festival. Lyra, now Empress, declared it a galaxy-wide holiday, Unity Day. Fireworks bloomed in hues of emerald and gold, and children, human and alien alike, danced beneath the twin moons. Joran held Vera close as music filled the courtyard. "We did good," he whispered. She rested her forehead against his, just as she had the day after the canyon. "We did better than good. We built something that lasts." In their final years, they sat often beneath the great sky willow, watching their legacy bloom in every running child, every shared meal, every handshake between former enemies. When Joran passed first, peacefully in his sleep, Vera held his hand and smiled through her tears. 6 months later, she joined him. Her last words, "Tell him I'm coming." They were buried together beneath the tree they'd planted as newlyweds. Their tombstone bore no titles, only 2 names, carved in both human script and Xylosian glyphs, and beneath them, a single phrase, "We chose each other." Every day. And from that garden, peace grew, not as a grand treaty, but as a quiet truth passed from parent to child, human to alien, heart to heart, forever.